Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Melbrick from Introvert Network Asia. Today, I've invited our guest, Wilson Chiu, who is co-founder of Reassemble, which is the UX company. So today we're going to talk about why UX is also important for small businesses. But before we go into that, I would like to kind of introduce Introvert Network Asia, which is the organizer for today's event. So I just want to share my screen. Okay, so Introvert Network Asia is an introvert network that's organized by introverts, and we understand introverts very well, so we actually create a very comfortable environment to let introverts network with each other. Just give me a minute. The screen just froze. Okay, I got back my screen. Sorry about that. Yeah, so okay. Well, I don't know what happened today. My slide is going haywire. Okay, so now let me restart again. So Introvert Network Asia started since 2013 from Singapore. We have now presence in Malaysia, also Indonesia and Philippines. So we actually set up this to create a very positive, nurturing environment for introverts to gain social interaction and have to build relationship with each other. So this is the team that is running the whole network. Okay, on the extreme right, you will see Mervin, which is our founder of the Introvert Network Asia. The rest are all the executive committees. And Introvert Network Asia actually run 4 signature programs. We have Coffee and Conversation, which is a very social gathering among introverts. So we just meet up to get coffee and have a chat, right? Inspiration and interaction is more the session where we actually invite speakers to kind of share knowledge with us, so that we can instead of just coming together, we also learn something together. And the third one is actually Introverts Business Mixer, which is our business networking session, where most of the introvert business owners actually gather together to meet up, to get business referrals with each other, get to know each other, build more connection. Okay, and this is some of the pictures that of the events that we have organized. I'm just going to scroll through. Right, you even have the small group interaction, one-to-one. So that's how we design introvert interaction and social gathering. Okay, meet up to learn from each other. We invited speakers presenting. Another, this is how our IBM looks like. And we have big events. This celebrate one of our anniversary. It's a fourth anniversary. And actually, we also meet up not just for business or interaction or formal networking. We also meet up for very casual makan session, right? Like Chendo. And we also meet up before for bowling session. Okay. And we know since this whole pandemic happened, we all go online, right? So we have all online meetup. So this is Introvert Network Asia. So if you're interested to find out more from us, join our WhatsApp group chat. Just scan the QR code, and you also find our Facebook page and our Facebook group, right? And just search Introvert Network Asia, you'll find us. Okay. So this is a short introduction of Introvert Network Asia. Right, without further ado, I'm going to hand over the screen to Wilson. Right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Wilson, I'll leave the floor to you for the presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melvrick, and thanks to all of you for coming here. So allow me to share my own screen now. Right. So Melvrick has introduced me briefly, right? So maybe let me add a little bit more. My name is Wilson. I've been a UX designer since about 2016, so about 5-ish years now. And since 2018, I've been the co-founder of a company called Reassemble. So we're actually a UX design company based in Singapore, and we do both the UX part of projects, right? Like we actually design digital interfaces, websites, and services for businesses of all sorts, right? And we also do capacity building, which is workshops, education, right? Trying to get companies to become more mature and understanding of the needs of their users, right? In all of their business decisions. Okay, so that's partly why I was asked to give this little talk on why UX is not just for big businesses, right? Which I think is a common misconception that people have, right? And actually, I would think it's the opposite, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why I think so, right? So today we're just going to go through a few short points, right? And I think the first and most important, right, is to rethink what we actually mean by design, right? So normally when I say, oh, hi, I'm Wilson, I'm a designer, people will say, oh, you're a designer, so what you surely you must be able to draw. Surely you must be able to design graphics, right? Or to make things pretty, right? You must be very good at colors, right? Things like that. And of course, that is a part of my work. It's part of the things that I do, right? But what I would like to talk about here, right, is a much wider view of what design really means. Okay, and to illustrate my point, let me show you these two things. Right, so on the left is the angsana tree, right? It's a big tree that you often see on roadsides in Singapore. And on the other side is the Gardens by the Bay, the super tree, right? So when you look at the two, right, which one is designed? Right, so it's pretty clear that when you talk about which one is designed, okay, the super tree is the one that's designed, right? So what does design mean in this case? It's not just about what the tree looks like or how the tree functions, all right? It's really more about the fact that before the super tree was a tree, it was actually just a bunch of metal pipes, right? There's all the different ingredients and the materials are just left in a pile there. Okay, what turned that into the super tree, all right, is what I would call design. Okay, design in the way I think about it is when you have a purpose and you use this purpose as the basis to make decisions, all right, you are already designing something. Okay, and this is true of almost every single business, right, in the world. I think the only businesses that don't need to design things would be farming because the rice will grow by itself, right? But besides that, right, every website, even if you don't actively think of yourself as doing design, it is being designed. Why? Because when a company says something like, oh, I want to create a website in order to get more customers to know who I am, that's already a purpose and that's already a decision. So that's a design there, right? Even if I'm, let's say, doing a completely non-digital business, let's say a lor-mee store, right? I'm just selling lor-mee, right? I still have to look for location, right? I'll have to design, find the correct equipment, right? And plan the layout of my store, right? I have to plan for things like the signboard of my store, okay, and what goes onto the signboard, right? So I'll put a photo of lor-mee there so that people know that this is what I'm selling, right? Again, that's purpose plus decisions, right? My purpose is to sell lor-mee. My decisions are all these little things that allow me to create a lor-mee shop, right? So That is what I mean by design. Actually, to be honest, whenever a business makes a decision and has a goal, right, that is already design. Okay, and that's why I think this quote by Steve Jobs, the former CEO of Apple, right, really drives it home. Right, design is not just what it looks like or what it feels like. Right, design is really about how it works. Okay, so if you go to, and I think a good illustration of this is if you go to, let's say, a hawker center, right? Actually, there's not much design, right? It's all tile floors and everything. Okay, but this design works, right? The stores that make good food. They'll have long queues. They have good business, right? Why? They are making the right decisions, right? They have the right purpose and are making the right decisions. Their design is good, even if their shop is quite ugly, right? That doesn't matter to the people who are coming to eat from them, right? So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because in my time as a UX designer, I often run into clients who tell us this, okay, that let's say they tell us they want to create an app. So we say, okay, yeah, you're creating an app. We should look into the design. We should look into doing a bit of research, and they will tell us, all right, oh, it's okay, actually, we are not doing design now. Now is not the time. This is not the time. Okay. To which my answer is, now is not the time. Actually, the time was from day one. The moment you said you wanted to build an app, all right, you're already doing a design, okay? And these people who say these things, all right, they tend to have the misconception that this is what their business looks like. You can either choose to design or choose to not design. The fact is, that was not a choice. The actual choice you have is about whether you will design consciously and therefore design well, or design blindly, right? You make decisions without thinking, right? And therefore you end up designing badly, right? You design an app that doesn't really work, and then people come, they look at it, and then they don't use it ever again, right? That kind of situation. Okay, so this is actually the reality that I want to drive home, right, to all of you. When they talk about design, right, it's not an option. Okay, it's already happening, even if you don't know that it is. Okay, so knowing that, then the question becomes, right, how can we design well? How do we avoid designing badly, right? And here is where I think actually it links back very well to what are the pros and cons of being a small business, right? Because this talk is about UX and its importance for small businesses. Okay, so in this case, when I talk about small businesses, I don't just mean tech startups, all right? I actually do mean SMEs of all kinds, right? You don't need to be mainly digitally based. You don't even need to have a digital element, all right? The point here is you're small, right? You don't have the resources of a large company like DBS, for example, or StanChart, right? Or FMB. You are not like McDonald's, right? And that makes you more vulnerable to market shocks, right? So the weakness of being small is all quite obvious. Okay. So as an example, right? My company, Reassemble, right? There are a total of 5 of us. We are a very small company. Okay. If we don't have the amount of money that, let's say, DBS has, right? I keep saying DBS is because DBS has a big UX team, a very big UX presence. Okay. They have one team that I know of that has about 20 to 25 UX designers, right? So one team in their company is equivalent to 5 of my company, all right? I cannot beat them in terms of numbers. I cannot beat them in terms of money. Nor can I beat them in terms of brand, because everyone knows who DBS is, right? You see the logo, you understand who they are, right? Nobody knows who my company is. Okay, so this is what a lot of startups and most small companies will face, right? We're always short of budget. We're always slightly short of hands. There's always a little bit too much work to do and a little bit too little time to do it. Okay, so in other words, a big company is like a T-Rex, right? Walking around. When they walk around, the earth will shake, right? The wind will blow. And small businesses like us, we are like the mice. Okay, so that's actually a mouse that lived during the same period as the T-Rex. It's one of the earliest mammals, right? And it was only about this size. Okay, and all they do is they hide around. They hope that the big ones don't notice them, right? But right, what has happened over the last few months was a little bit like this. Okay, we are undergoing something that is quite unprecedented, actually. Okay, I mean, our country has been lucky. We've not had a war since the Second World War, right? And this is really the biggest forced change in behavior that we've had since then, right? Because when circuit breaker came into effect on April 7, right, 2359 passed, everyone suddenly had to change their behavior. You can't go to the office, you can't socialize, you can't go out and shop, right? You can't go out and eat. Okay, now you're all stuck at home, right? And that has actually forced us to change behavior in many, many ways, right? That kind of interact with each other as well, right? Because now my work is also in my room, my socialization is also in my room. How do I balance these two? Okay, and all these changes in human behavior, right? They are what create what we call business environments and business opportunities. Okay, so right now what you're really seeing is in this economic crisis, it's not really equal impact, right? There are actually a lot of companies that do very well out of this, right? These tend to be the companies that have already adapted, all right, that have already made the change, right, in a timely manner or maybe even in advance, okay? And that brings me to what is the superpower of a small business. Okay, a small business has this superpower, which is that we are flexible and we are adaptable. But what does that mean in practice? Okay, what it really means in practice is if we consider design to be decisions, right? A small company can make big decisions. All right. Just to give you an example, my own company, all right. Before 2019, we didn't really do workshops, all right. We didn't really do training and education. It was me, right? So I was the one who, after doing like courses on facilitation, and because I have a bit of experience, so I told my co-founders, like, why don't we try this? Why don't we do UX courses and UX workshops, right? And how long did it? And that's actually quite a big decision, right? It's like adding an entire new product line to the existing product line that we have, all right? And guess how long it took us to make the decision? It took us like from 9 in the morning to about lunch, right? We had a discussion, we discussed how to make this work with our current strategy. And then at the end of that, before we went for lunch, my co-founders told me, Wilson, if you think you can do this, if you think we're confident, then okay, we try lah. And that was that, right? We made a massive decision, all right, so easily. Okay, large companies would never be able to do this, right? McDonald's, all right. Recently, I found out from my friend, okay, that in order to plan for one new item in the menu, right? Because they always have new items, right? They have to plan about 1 year in advance. Okay, you can never make big decisions in a company like McDonald's, right? If changing one item takes you 1 year, all right, how much would it take to add another menu to this menu, right? It never happens. So a small company, our advantage is we have a lot better capacity to adapt, to react, and to make big design changes, right? Big, bold changes. Okay. So the problem with that is it's a bit of a gamble also, right? Because just now we say you can either design well or design badly. If you make big choices that design well, then your company will grow. You will become successful and thrive. But your superpower is useless if you use this superpower of making big decisions to make big and bad decisions, right? If you design badly, you will just die faster, right? Because you don't have the resources to survive. Okay. So in order to leverage, right, on our superpower as small businesses, right, we need principles, right? It's like having a compass on a boat or GPS in your car, right? We need the right principles to guide our decision. All right. And I firmly believe, in fact, I wouldn't say believe, I firmly know, okay, that to be user-centered, right, is one of those principles that really helps lead to good decisions, right? Why is that so? Because ultimately, businesses live and die by their users, right? Our customers, our end users, they are the ones that give us our money and revenue, right? They are the ones that, if they like us, they'll bring their friends in to buy stuff from us, all right? And when they are so important to the running and the success of our business, all right, it is very natural that our design decisions, right, should center around them, right, not necessarily around ourselves, right? And in response to like, when is the right time to be user-centered, right? Should you wait until you are the size of DBS before you should be user-centered? I would say no, exactly, it's the opposite, all right? The time to be user-centered, the time to think about your users is now when you're small, right? Why? Because it's small businesses that desperately need growth. It's small businesses that can make big decisions. And that's the time when you use this principle to move in the right direction and grow quickly, right? So as an example, right, we can ask this man over here, right, Jeff Bezos. So right now, he's the richest man on earth. His company is about $2 trillion worth now, right? But this quote is actually from 1999. And it shows you that actually when he started Amazon, which was back, I think, in 1994, all right, this was already part of his attitude, all right? The fact was that Bezos really was into creating a good experience for the customers, for the shoppers at Amazon, whether it's just to sell books or whether it's to buy everything, okay? And because this attitude, all right, started from the very start when they were small and they were able to make quick changes, all right, then it's like what I said, they use their flexibility to make good choices, right? And that really set them on the path of growth, right? That really set them on a path to be able to say that because we are always researching and figuring out and testing, right, and trying to understand what makes our users happy, right? That's why we have so many people buying stuff from us. Then they are now one of the biggest companies in the world, right? Amazon. Okay, so some of the more concrete benefits, all right, higher conversion. I think this one is quite obvious. I think as users and customers, we have all gone onto websites before where we look around and we are like, oh, I cannot find what I wanted to buy. I came in, I wanted to buy a t-shirt, but then I couldn't find t-shirts anywhere. So after that, I leave the website, right? So a well-designed, okay, user experience reduces this kind of problem, all right? It's like, imagine if you have a clothing shop, all right? And then when people walk into the clothing shop, they realize that all the clothes that you sell are in one pile in the middle of the floor, right? And then you just tell, your service is just there to tell people, oh, you want the shirt? You go and dig, you go and dig inside the pile, right? Who will really go and dig inside your pile, right? No, right? People, when you see this, I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to buy from you, right? Because this is not convenient, okay? So just as a case in point, all right, even Amazon faced this problem, which was that for e-commerce, okay, 1 out of every 7 transactions are lost at checkout. All right, people go all the way to the checkout and then they give up. All right, and that is costing people about 14% worth of their revenue, right? 14% worth of their sales. Okay, so Amazon, what they did was they managed to put in a restructuring of the checkout process. All right, they put in better designs, better signaling, right, to tell users how long more they have to do, how many steps more are there in the process, right? And by doing that, they managed to cut that loss by half, right? So you're talking about 7% additional growth every year, just in terms of revenue, right? Because fewer people are giving up on your conversions, right? And the thing is, when fewer people give up on you, then more people also return to you, right? We know, for example, that customer retention is a lot more valuable than customer acquisition, right? So when we have something that makes people's lives easier, right, they will come back. And maybe they'll even bring their friends back, right? They become advocates for our business, which is the most valuable kind of user, right? So a study by Bain Consulting, right, they actually found out that when you have a 10% increase in user retention, you can increase your business value by up to 30%, right? This is not marketing. You don't have to find new people to come and buy. It's just about providing a good experience, providing good service, good, easier navigation, right? Easier finding, right? So that when people buy stuff from you, they are more likely to come back to you. That's all it is, right? And that can increase your business value by 30%. Okay. A third thing, right? Whether it's digital or it's real life, I think this is something that often happens. Okay, but this is especially for digital, right? User-centered design allows you to catch problems, all right, or catch possible flaws in your model or your service a lot more early. And when you can catch those problems early, they're a lot easier to fix. Okay, think about this in a sense that if you're drawing a blueprint of a house, and while you're drawing the blueprint, you forgot to draw in the toilet. Okay, and somebody looks at the blueprint and asks you, okay, hey, Wilson, where's the toilet in this house? Right, it's quite easy to fix at that point, right? You just have to figure out where the toilet is and draw it back in. Okay, now imagine, right, that you are halfway through building the house, all right, and people are already laying the bricks and putting up the walls. Okay, and then someone comes to you and says, Wilson, just to check, where is the toilet? I don't see any toilet in the plans. Okay, now you imagine trying to fix that problem when you're already trying to build a house. Okay, And that actually happens a lot in a lot of digital businesses and among a lot of startups, right? So the commonly cited ratio is that it will cost 100 times more to fix a problem after you launch a website than to fix the problem if you find it earlier. Yeah. Okay. So that's $99 worth of savings, right? Just by catching a problem before it turns into something that affects your users. Okay. And finally, right, as a summary, okay, McKinsey, right, they did a study of listed businesses, right, and they found out that listed companies that focus on user experience, right, they grow at up to 2 to 3 times the average rate. Right? So these are big companies actually, right? So even big companies making small decisions can double their growth compared to their peers, right? Imagine how powerful it is when you are a small company that can make big decisions, right? You grow, the difference in the rate of growth is something more akin to, let's say, Amazon, really. Yeah. Right. So having said all of this about, how working with your users and having your users at the center, right? How does that help us? Okay, so we're going to go on to talk a little bit about the basic principles, right, of what it means when I say I care about the experience of my users. Okay, and today, and I'm not, okay, so sometimes I fall into this trap, right, that when people ask me, okay, Wilson, how do I do UX? Right, and I fall into this trap where I tell them, oh, okay, you can do usability testing, you can do user research, you can do interviews, you can do user flows, you can do customer journey mapping, blah, 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 blah. All right. And I find that is something like telling, this is a carpenter's toolbox, by the way. So I find that that's something like giving the carpenter's toolbox to a guy who's not a carpenter. Okay. It's like, I tell you, oh, there's a saw here, there's a chisel, there's a screwdriver, there's everything is inside here. The problem is this: if you have all these tools in your toolbox, right, but you don't think like a carpenter and you don't know what a carpenter knows, all right, even with the toolbox, you are still not a carpenter. You will still not be able to work well. If I give you a piece of wood, you will still screw it up, right? I think that's the case with a lot of things, especially in UX. Okay, so what I want to talk about more today is, before we even discuss any UX design technique or tool, right, we must get our mindset right. Okay, and over the years, I've been thinking about how to distill this down, and I think I managed to distill this down into 3 main principles. Okay, which is empathy, evidence, and iteration. Okay, so what does empathy mean? Okay, empathy means that, okay, so I'm going to talk about my preference for lor mee again, right? You may have noticed that I really like to eat lor mee. So when I order lor mee, I always add vinegar. Right? I like sour food, so I always add extra vinegar into my lor mee. Now imagine that I'm selling lor mee in a store. Okay, if I base my idea of the perfect lor mee on what I like to eat, okay, a natural move is I will just add vinegar to everybody's lor mee. Right? Every time you order from me, I will add extra 2 tablespoons before I give to you, because that's the way I like it. Right? But is that going to work? No. Right? And here's the key about empathy. Right? Empathy is when we recognize as a business or as the designers that what I think about my product or what I like about my product actually doesn't matter. Right? I like lor mee that's sour. All right? Nobody cares. Yeah, I'm the only one who cares. What matters is whether my lor mee is something that my customers like to eat. Right? So what matters is what my product can provide for the people who actually use it. Right? So when you think about things that way, right, it's what we call user-centered design versus self-centered design, right? That is the first and biggest step, right, into understanding what a good UX means. Okay. The second part, evidence. All right. So having empathy is not enough, right? Because empathy means that we are trying to think like other people. But on what basis can we say that we can really think like other people, right? You can sit there and think all day. It doesn't mean that you understand what other people are doing, right? So the best way to understand that, right, the best way to have a factual basis, right, is to get good information, right? It's what we call evidence. So how can we gather this evidence, right? Sometimes it can be by asking people. So again, if we go back to lor mee, right, I'm not going to talk about websites. I just want to talk about lor mee. If you go back to lor mee, it's very simple. Sometimes it's as simple as you can observe your customers and what they keep asking you to add to your order, right? If someone tells you, hey, uncle, I want more garlic. Uncle, I want more chili. Uncle, why you give me so little chili? Give me more chili, right? If everyone is telling me, uncle, give me more chili, right? That provides me with the evidence that I know something about what my users prefer, right? So good decisions, right, must be based on good information, and this information must come from users, right? Sometimes it's about observing them, like I said just now. Sometimes it comes from asking them, right? So you do user interviews, you may do focus groups or surveys, right? Sometimes it comes from asking them to do something for you and then watching how they do it, right? Which is the basis of usability testing, right? So you can see that a lot of the UX tools and processes are really just expressions of these principles. Okay. I just realized that I put all as principle one, but okay, I will iterate it later, right? And the third and last principle, all right, is called iteration. And I think I included this because I think in Singapore, a lot of companies, they have this big fear that when they launch the product, it won't be perfect. Okay, that they want to hold it in first and then only launch it when it's perfect. All right. But I think this is not quite the right way to do things. All right. I think it's better to understand that and to admit and accept, right, that no product is launched perfect. Okay. If you want to know what I mean, all right, just now we were talking about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, right? Go and look at the Amazon website from 1996. It is very ugly, very ugly. Okay, it's blue text with it's black text on blue background. Right, it's really really hard to read, right? But it was quite clear. That was a basic, right? And what was the thing about Amazon? They didn't launch the product perfect, but the product got better and better as they moved on, right? As they learn, as they empathize, as they get evidence, they work on the evidence and improve. Okay, so no product is launched perfect, but every product must become better over time. And the way to do that is you gather your evidence and you revise your decisions, right? So that when you do something, right, you make sure that you do it with some evidence behind it, and you're always trying to move a little bit closer to what your user wants and what really helps your user, right? So when you do that, I think that is really the only way you can make a product that is close to perfect, right? Because we can never know what other people want before we show them and they tell us. Okay, so I think instead of being perfectionist, it is better to iterate, right? So that's all I have in terms of expressing, what are the fundamental parts of UX and why it is so important for small businesses, right? And I understand that we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, right? But at the same time, okay, what I am going to do is I will show okay, so just now I think Melverick was talking about some of the concerns that he encountered from the Introverts Business Network. And some people, I think what he said was that, some people don't really know, like, how do I become user-centered, right? Even if I have the mindset, okay, is there a way I can make it more concrete, something more actionable, right? And of course, it turns out you can, right? So today I am going to show you a tool, right? This is a very basic and preliminary tool that I think that I will often recommend to people who have never done any user-centered thinking before. All right. So maybe, you've just been spending this time just making products or like creating your service and trying to push it out and doing a lot of marketing. You may not have been thinking about who you are working for, who you are working towards, right? Who you're trying to design for. And that's fine, right? And that's what the Proto-Persona is supposed to solve. Okay. So it provides you with a way to organize what you know about your users. All right. So it's actually really simple. Okay. It's just 4 boxes. Okay. The top left box, right? You put a picture if you can, right, of someone, right? And then you write down the name and some information about them, basic information, demographic information, right? Age, maybe marital status if it's relevant, right? You can talk about their work, right, if it's relevant. Okay. On the right of that, you then write about your goals, right? Or well, not your goals. You can write about the user's goals, right? So, for example, when a user is interacting with your service or when they come into your shop, right? What are they trying to look out for? What are they aiming to do? Okay, so those are the goals. Okay, The bottom left, behavior, right, is linked to your goals, right? If I have a goal and let's say it's lunchtime, right? I want to get lunch, right? My behavior is I will start going out to look for hawker stalls or restaurants, right? Very simple. So the behaviors tell you how people try to achieve their goals, all right? Do they, and from here, sometimes you can tell, right? Is this process smooth? Is this process very convoluted? Is it process very lecce, right? That's how sometimes you can even tell beforehand, right, what improvements you need to make, right? And finally, it's context. So context tells us a little bit more about the when, the where, right, and what the situation is like, right, when they are facing an issue, all right, or when they're having a goal and they're trying to behave a certain way. So I can show you an example. So this was actually an example Proto-Persona that we did for a healthcare information app. And that was back in 2017. So even before I founded Reassemble, I was doing this with a friend of mine, right? And we were basically just trying to organize the information around how do we warn people or provide advanced warning, provide advanced information about upcoming health conditions that they may have. Okay, so this was one of the proto-personas we have, right? So it's very simple again, right? Don't even have a photo this time around, but never mind, right? So it's John Wong, right? He's in his late 30s, marketing manager. He has a family, and importantly, right, he has a family history of diabetes. Okay, so because he's aware of that, right, because he doesn't want to get diabetes, obviously, right? So he has a series of goals to try to prevent that from happening, right? And that includes things like, he wants to control his sugar intake, right? He wants to ensure that his whole family, his wife, his kid, they have a healthier diet. Okay, but at the same time, he doesn't really enjoy the stress of cooking. All right. And sometimes when you eat healthy stuff, it might get repetitive. So how do you get more options for that? Right. So these are their goals. Okay. And you can see that the goals and the behaviors are quite linked, right? So the thing is, in order to control his sugar intake and to have a healthier diet, what John tried to do is he tries to cook more at home, because when you're at home, you can cook and you can control what goes into your food, right? So it's a little bit healthier. Okay. And in order to ease that process, he tries to do weekly meal plans, right? So that's when he tries to reduce the stress of cooking. Okay. So every week he tries to be like, oh, okay, we're going chicken on Monday, fish on Tuesday, blah, 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 right? But at the same time, because this guy is a marketing manager, he's quite a busy guy, all right? Normally, by the time he can shop for groceries, all right, he's knocked off work and he may be 7+8 already. Okay, so this poor guy has to go to the cold storage at night, like 8+ to go and gather all the groceries that he needs, right? And that links also to the context, right? Both he and his wife are working. They're both very busy. Okay, the son is in the primary school now. What does that mean? You may not be able to control all of the food that he has, right? You may not be able to have a big effect on his diet, right? And finally, also, okay, to add to the inconvenience, right? When he tries to buy, he finds that the supermarket near his office has better options, okay? But he has to buy the stuff near his office and then carry all the stuff back home, right, on the MRT or the bus or whatever, right? That's quite a drag, right? So actually, so when you look at it, right, just based on this, just based on looking at the few points that we know. I mean, this thing took us like 20 minutes to write up, okay? And really by the end of this, you can already start thinking, oh, there are some things that we can really help John to do, right? There are some ways we can make John's life easier. There are certain gaps, right? There's some kind of service that we can offer to him, right? And that's how you start being user-centered, right? When you start defining your problems not as problems that you think exist, right? So when I design this app, I can either say, oh, I think our app should do this, this, this. Or I can look at John and say, I think what John needs from this app is this, 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 right? And that will be a much better way of designing, because I'm not designing for me. I'm designing for the guys who are actually using my app or using my service, right? Or buying my product, whatever the case may be. Okay. So okay, I'm not going to get you guys to do this right now, right? So actually the slides, I will be providing the slides to Melvrick to share, right, with all the attendees, all right? And yeah, feel free to take this Proto-Persona, all right? Take it back and start filling it in. with context from your own business, with information from your own business and your own operations. Okay? And another good thing is, as you do that, right, it's also good to keep asking yourself, right, what are the things that I don't know yet, right? Like sometimes, you will look at behavior and then you realize the behavior is quite blank. I don't really know how they behave, right? And that is also a good learning, because it means that you need to start observing. You need to start gathering evidence there, right? Another thing to ask is, what am I assuming, right? So if I say something like, oh, John, he likes stress-free cooking. All right. How exactly do I know he likes stress-free cooking? Did I ask someone who was like John? Or did I just take my own experience as someone who's close to John? Or is it just gossip? Is it just guesswork? Right? And obviously, if it's guesswork, then you have a problem. This is something you need to verify, because you don't want to run the risk that when you design something, it turns out to be the wrong solution. Right? So with that, all right, I thank you very much, right, all of you, for attending. Okay, and you can keep in touch with me via LinkedIn or with my email. And you have any questions to ask, I'm very happy to entertain them. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Wilson.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now we actually open up the questions for the floor, right? But let me start first, right, to get the ball rolling. I also run a small business myself, and just to admit to everyone, I never thought that UX is a kind of thing for small businesses. It's only recently when I started to redesign my own website, and a lot of thought process went into building a new website, and even like where the button should be. After clicking a button, where should we bring the user to? So that's one. And even like homepage, right? What should put on the homepage? What is critical? What do I want to showcase to the user? So it's designing an entire website puts a lot of thought process in terms of UX. Right? And at the moment, I didn't know that was actually UX, but after a while, I get to know that that's actually kind of the UX designing, right? And if everyone who are also running small businesses, if you just change the word user experience, the front word user, to customer experience, then you know that it's actually very important, because
you know how important it is. Yeah.
Yes,
correct.
yes. Yeah. So actually, user is also referring to your customer, right? So I'm very convinced that UX design is also very important for small businesses, right? So anyone want to ask any questions from the audience? Mike, Ashley, Will, anyone? You can just on your video and just unmute yourself and ask the question. Right, or if you are too shy, you can just type it on the chat. I'll just read it out the question for you. Anyone? No? If not, I'm going to ask another question.
You asked.
Okay, so Wilson, right? After I kind of convinced that UX is also important for small business, right? And there's a few use cases we can apply, not just on a website, because all small businesses today have their own website, right? So that's the area where I feel that UX need to be applied. Like you need to put in a lot of thought process in designing a website. How many pages are there? What are pages? What to go into which page? And how would the users, how they surf your website from the time they land on your web page now? So that's like a use case for UX. Any other good examples of use case that small businesses need to adopt UX design?
Yeah. So in terms of, okay, I think here's the interesting thing, right? Which is that before we had user experience, okay, that didn't mean that we were not caring for our users and customers. It's just that in the past, before UX was a thing, a lot of people would just call it customer service, right? And that's actually part of what the experience is, right? So for example, I think the website, of course, like website design and how you design navigation, right? That's a very important thing. But if you look at, for example, any business, right, that interacts with people, okay, they will need to think about how to provide a good experience. And one good example of this, or even before there were websites, was supermarkets, right? You notice that supermarkets, almost all supermarkets, right? The very first thing you see as you are entering the supermarket is almost always fresh vegetables and fresh fruit and fresh flowers. Okay, there's a reason for that, right? The reason for that is because we understand, right, as supermarkets understand, that when people are in the frame of mind to come in and start buying groceries, all right, what are they looking out for all the time? They're thinking, right, oh, I'm going to buy stuff. Is it fresh? Is it good? Is it of good quality? Right? Obviously I don't want to buy anything that's rotten or has gone bad, right, or has gone sour, right? So that's what I'm worrying about as I'm walking in. And when I'm walking in and you show me the fresh vegetables and the fresh fruit, right, that changes, that fits what I'm hoping for. It fits what I'm expecting, right? And that already makes us feel better, even before we've bought stuff, right? It already makes us feel a little bit better. Okay, so that's one example that I know is quite classic. But also, like, so whenever you are thinking of something that the user or your customer is trying to do, right, with you, okay, user experience comes into play, right? For example, if you are designing, let's say, a bank, right? So many things you can do inside a bank, right? With all the counters and all the queues and everything, right? And in the past, when design was not that good, they would just put one machine in the center with or in the table in the center, right? You press that thing and it'll just give you a number. You also don't really know where to read the number, right? So you just sit there and hope for the best, right? Or even worse, you will take the queue number and then you'll stay in the queue anyway, right? Before realizing that it was the wrong queue. So over the last about 10 years, right, there has really been a lot of advances in how this has changed, right? So that right now it's a lot easier for you to understand, right? Oh, which is the queue I'm supposed to be going for, right? Which are the counters that are supposed to be serving me, all right? Which are the things that I should be doing in my situation, right? That reduces the risk of making a mistake or reduces the feeling of sitting there and doing nothing and getting bored, right? So all that is about directing our perception, all right, of what we should be doing and how we feel about things, right? So so when you talk about user experience, right, long before digital interfaces were a thing, user experience was already a thing. It's just that right now, when with digital, with websites, right, we have become even more impatient. We have become tuned to expect things even more quickly. All right, we have become tuned to absorb larger amounts of information, right, but not really to process them. Okay, so this has led to a lot of expectations and behaviors and ways of thinking, right, that a good user experience designer tries to work towards, right? Sometimes it's not really about what is accurate or what is best. It's about what you expect is the case, right? If I can make a website that works to your expectations, right, that is good enough for a lot of users. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson, for that sharing, right? So from the floor, I think that I just received a question. Yeah, so
Oh, cool.
basically, right, yeah, um, the the sharing that you have for the principle, right, and the iteration, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you don't need to really kind of design the entire thing upfront and then launch it one wholesale, right? So
Mhm.
what you need to do is just launch a very basic and then just kind of get iterations from there.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit, like, so how many iterations is kind of acceptable, or will the customer feel that you keep changing things and it kind of affect the entire user experience, like
Yes.
backfire lah. So
Yes.
anything to share on that area?
Yes. So that's actually very interesting. And in how in the startup field, right? So in the startup practice, people like to talk about this thing called the MVP, right? The minimum viable product, right? And the big problem with this term is that a lot of people forget the viable part, right? They just think it means a minimum product. Then they will launch the minimum product, which is not viable. Okay. what does minimum viable product mean, right? To answer what Maverick was saying, to answer what the question is asking about, how do you make users not feel like they are getting something that's half-baked, right? That's the key question we are thinking of. We want the user to feel more like, I received one thing and now I'm adding value to it, rather than I received half a thing and only now are you giving me the other half, right? And that brings to mind something about someone actually once gave this talk, right, about how do you design a car using MVP principles. Okay, and what he says, the wrong way to design a car using MVP principles is to design the car one wheel at a time, right? So if version 1 is a car with one wheel, version 2 is a car with two wheels, then version 3 is a car with three wheels, all right? And you think about that is, when can you drive this car, right? You can't actually drive this car until version 4.0, because only then does it actually have all four wheels, right? That is what would be the wrong way of iterating, okay? Because it's not empathetic, right? If you understood that, why do people come to buy a car from me, all right? People don't just buy the car to put that, right? They buy the car because they need to do something. The thing they need to do is to get around, right? Ultimately, it's a tool for them to get around. Okay, so now the question becomes not just how do I iterate the car from one wheel to two wheels to three wheels, but how do I allow the person to achieve their goals, right? A customer can achieve my goals by getting around, right? But they will get around in better and better ways. Okay, so what the person who gave this talk, right, what he suggested, right, was more like the MVP process is the very start. The very first product, version 1.0, right, shouldn't be a car with one wheel, right? It should be something like, the foot scooter, the scooter that the kids will use, right? That you have to kick yourself on. Okay. Is it efficient? Not really, right? You have to kick using your own leg. Is it simple? Yeah, it's really very simple, right? It's not very pretty. There's no aircon, nothing, right? You are outside the scooter. Okay. But does it allow you to get somewhere? Yes, it definitely allows you to get somewhere. Okay. And then from the foot scooter, you move to e-scooter, which is a better version of the foot scooter, right? Then maybe you move to a motorbike, which is a better version of the e-scooter. And finally, version 4.0, you move to a car, right? So in both of these lines, okay, the car only comes in at version 4.0, okay? But in one of the lines, right, where you give one wheel at a time, you end up with a lot of pissed off users because they cannot even get anywhere until they get to version 4. Whereas on the other side, okay, you get happy users. You get users that actually get happier and happier as the project goes on, because at first it's a bit simple, but I can accept. Then it becomes more like, oh, there's more services, more features, more functionalities, right? That is what you really talk about. And so when we talk about iteration, right, it doesn't just mean that we give something that's half baked and fully bake it later. All right. It's more about, and that goes back to empathy. It's more about understanding what users need to do and giving it to them first, but maybe in its simplest form, right? And then adding value to that over and over again, right? That is what we mean by real iteration, right? And at the end of that process, right, people will tend to forget that the first version was quite simple, right? And they will enjoy that this version is so much bigger. Yeah. So that's how I would say the right way to iterate actually is. Yeah.
Yeah, very true. Thanks, Wilson, for sharing that. Yeah, so I think we come to the 4 p.m. already, so that's what we intended the session to be. But before we go off, right, I hope everyone have a deeper understanding of what UX is all about, and I hope that especially for small businesses, right, you start to kind of pay a little bit more attention to that and adopt it in various areas of your business, right? Not just website. There are a lot of use cases, so find out more. And if you also like to find out like more from Wilson, right? We are actually organizing a monthly business networking session
Yes.
organized by Introverts Network Asia. Right. Our next session. Let me just share the screen. I hope we don't freeze my screen again. Hold on. Okay. So our next Introverts Business Mixer, which is our own version of business networking, where you're going to meet fellow introvert business owners. 15th of September, 2020, 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Right, you actually meet people like Wilson and many others who are experts in their various businesses. Like Wilson is an expert in UX, so you actually can find out more from their sharing, right? We each of the session during the business networking, we also get two of our members to share their expertise, right? For example, you will be able to hear Wilson again soon when he presents face to face, right? Where you can probably ask him questions. And during the business networking, we also break out into smaller groups, like 4-person, where you can actually get to know each other better and deeper. So yeah, I hope to see some of you joining our business networking on the 21st on the 15th of September, right? More details you can visit our Facebook page or our website, right? Introvertsnetwork.asia, right? So hope to see you all face to face or meet up online Zoom that we have organized our online meetups and networking sessions. Right. So thank you, Wilson, for joining us today. Right. Thank you, everyone, for attending and listening to us.
Right.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks so much. Right. Bye.